Okay, so this is a Van der Grinton projection. Where is it? I'll show you this. Okay, so they're admitting that the distances at 75 and 60 degrees are well expanded, but try and find a map for me or yourself that has all of these countries depicted in their exact size. I don't buy the excuses that ballers continue to make, that you have to stretch it if you're going to flatten a ball. I've thought about that. If you had a logo on a football, you would be able to depict that logo in its actual size. I've got some scratchings on this one. I've done hundreds of measurements. Only a few of them I've got here in my book. I'll go through some of them with you today. Sorry about the laundry pile. These are interesting times, very interesting times. Let me start with something that you guys are familiar with. Here's a city you might have heard of, San Diego. Drive to or walk. We're going to do all of these as a walkabout only. It's not a perfect means of discerning a scale, but give or take, you walk in pretty much in a straight line most of the time. So given that some roads or some paths are going to be a little bit dog-legged, I'm going to assume the similar kind of dog-legging going on with most of these routes that we look at today. So here's San Diego, and there's New York. That walk is 4,500 kilometers. Here is San Diego, and this is Costa Rica. That walk is about 4,500 kilometers. And then this walk here, which kind of follows the coast up into Alaska, around about here. Well, blow me, that walk is shorter than that walk. So we know for sure that this area here, all of this, is massively oversized. We can also discern that even the America east to west, or west to east, is also not depicted as its actual size. So what I've decided to do is use Africa as my template and say, okay, if there's a distance that we can discern in Africa, let's use that as our sort of baseline. I know that Africa isn't exactly depicted as it is, but if we use that as the kind of basis for a scale, if you like, because I don't trust Van der Grinton or any of the other actors that have been drawing maps for us. So here we go, Cape Town, South Africa, up through Namibia, Angola. This is where I was in war as a 19-year-old boy, and up into Oran, or around here in Algeria, or Algiers itself. That walk is about 9,500, 10.2. That's 10.2 Ks. Algiers is 10.4 thousand, 10,400 Ks. Interesting, where I grew up, in Durban, if you take this walk up into this area here, you're looking at about 11,000, just over 11,000 kilometers. So that's going to be my going to be my baseline, is that this distance here is around 11,000 kilometers. Unfortunately, my pen's not quite the length I was looking for, but that's 11K. All right. Then I'm going to run through a series of interesting walks for you. So we've set the baseline. somewhere between 10 and 11,000 kilometers is this distance here, give or take. Yes, it's a little bit wobbly, but all of the tracks that we're going to take today are a little bit wobbly, so we'll allow for a similar amount of wobble. All right, so from Cape Town to Sharm el Sheikh, which is a real place that I've done some diving at in Egypt here, is 9,500 kilometers. Then from Sharm el Sheikh here, follow this path up through Turkey, over the Black Sea. So when you use Google Maps to tell you where to go, or it'll give you a route, it'll very kindly it'll allow for ferries, water crossings and so on. So in the main, with the exception of large distances across, the kind of cruise ship type stuff, which I looked at as part of this research, it's not going to offer you a cruise, but it will take you over various bodies of water over into Europe from Africa, and then, as I say, through the Black Sea, and then over through all the way through Russia, all this way through Russia to Vladivostok, right over here near Japan, North Korea, if that's even real. And how long do you think that walk is? So remember, this is 9.5, my apologies. This is 11. This is 11 here. So how far do you think that this walk is? Well, this walk is 11.7 thousand. So near enough the same distance from Durban to Algiers is the distance from Sharm el Sheikh to Vladivostok. So if I was just to use my fingers as a guide, like that, I mean, this is bending around a bit, but just to say, roughly speaking, I would say Vladivostok on a fair map would be somewhere around there, just on that basis alone. From Sharm el Sheikh to Ho Chi Minh, over here in Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh's down here. This walk from here to here is 10,000 kilometers, and it's not too dissimilar to the Africa measurement. So when I was doing my research on this, I realized that perhaps this stretch of land isn't remarkably swollen like this area is. Let me press on. From Lisbon, which is over here in Portugal, all the way through to Vladivostok is 13,000 kilometers. So only really just a little bit further, 10-15% further than this distance, and yet you've managed to span, well, many degrees, very far around the globe, as they call it. From Vladivostok to Sanaa, which is here, well, this is 13,500 kilometers. So again, a similar kind of distance. And I'll just remind you that one of the things that really caught my attention when I was first doing this research was that if I wanted to travel from Sanaa to somewhere around here, Djibouti, it wouldn't offer me a ferry across here, anywhere. What it wants me to do is it wants me to walk up into Iraq and then back down here like this. And that walk is 7,500 kilometers, or 7,700 kilometers. In other words, just across this little Red Sea here, Gulf of Aden. I'm meant to travel further than the whole of across the United States. And that was something that really bothered me. It was like, wow, that makes no sense at all, because Saudi Arabia is a wealthy country. These people have got plenty of ships and ferries and all that sort of thing. And having spent some time here diving, I know that it's boat central. I mean, there's boats all over the place, so that I can't get offered a boat across here started to make me think that these spaces this is not connected. But every single map shows this tiny gap. That I've never seen a map with a large gap, and they call it the Arabian Peninsula. And I've got a feeling that that this area, when you start to look at the distances between these places, you start to think, and even the shipping, it takes a cruise ship about 4 days to get here, just to do this journey here. So I think that I started to think that perhaps these are stretched so far apart that there's no shipping between these places here. Now, if someone can evidence or demonstrate conclusively that that's not true, then I'd be happy to reconsider my thoughts on that. I mean, interestingly, when you walk along here, Pakistan, India, you start to find areas around here that you can't walk through. You have to always walk around them as if they're not really there. There's a lot of places that you start to find like that. But let me carry on with the distances. So Sana'a to Djibouti, as I said, is 7,700 kilometers. Djibouti to Vladivostok is 15,000 kilometers. And you would be taking probably this route here to get there. Vladivostok to Kathmandu, here, this route here, 11,000. So this is where I started to wonder about China, because I wanted to kind of go from Vladivostok to somewhere here. It always will reach you all the way around Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And these are all, by the way, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, these are all areas that have been kept in state of natural third world kind of disturbance, shall we say. So I can keep going around. Kathmandu, Bhutan, here, that's 11,700 kilometers. Mandalay is 12,700. Hanoi here is 14,500 kilometers. So it would route you this way rather than having you walk through China. You can come here to Ulaanbaatar. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But try and come from Ulaanbaatar in Outer Mongolia into mainland China or Inner Mongolia, and you can't find any routing for that. So from Hanoi to Beijing, where's Beijing now? Yeah. So from Hanoi to Beijing is not available on Google Maps. There's no route for that. And Hanoi to Nanning, Nanning is here, so this little walk here, not available. This is the Gulf of Tonkin. Most of you will know the business, the Americans' involvement in the Gulf of Tonkin and all of that. So again, it's an area that's been heavily destabilized. But you apparently can't walk to these places. Now, I implore you to go and do your own research on this. And when you do, and you sort of really look in closely, you'll find that there are areas just inside of China, perhaps around here, that you can reach from these areas. However, if you try to walk from this place, Kashi, to Beijing, it's not available. As I said, Mongolia Ulaanbaatar cannot reach. There is no apparent walking routes between these. People may say, well, it's all very mountainous, it's all very communist. I don't necessarily buy that. You can travel. Google Maps will offer you walks all the way around here up to about 3,500 kilometers, maybe 3,700. For this video, I'm not going to do the detail in China. I was eager to get this video out before the landscape changes. I've got a number of other distances that I will run through at the end of this video, just so you guys can see some of. I only wrote down a fraction of the distances that I looked into, but I'm hoping that this will inspire you to do a lot of your own work on this. So this is a very important point, is that once I'd done so many attempts to get into China, into the China mainland, without any success, I started looking at flights like from Vladivostok to Beijing. Would you believe that you have to take 4 planes to get from here to here? And it just doesn't make any sense. I don't remember exactly the routing, but I think you had to go like to Shanghai, somewhere else, and one other, and it was going to, the total flight time, if you added up the 4 flights, was about 8 hours. So none of that made sense. I would say that the relationship between these countries is not, we all know that the sort of enmity that's fostered between these countries is designed to give people this idea that, yes, we can't travel in there, we can't do these things because of the nature of the relationship with these countries. So I don't buy that. I suggest, so after having tried to get into China, I realized that perhaps China wasn't, to accept that perhaps China wasn't even connected, this part of China wasn't even connected to Europe or Asia in the way that we imagine it is. And so I spent a lot of time trying to unpick this and think, well, if I had to cut this out and then keep these distances there or thereabouts the same, I think I realized that there was possibly a 10%, something like that, shrinking on this land here. But to cut this out and push this all up into that space, or perhaps there's more ocean here than we realize, because this, for example, this Lake Baikal here, that distance around that lake is 2,000 kilometers if you were to walk it. And that's a massive lake, and I would suggest that that's a real body of water. And if the walk around it is 2,000 kilometers, it's not directly on, the walk won't take you right on the shore side, but if that's 2,000 kilometers and it's been shrunk down to this, when we know that, let me think if I can give you a distance that is about 2,000 kilometers. I know that this is about 2,000 kilometers in reality. This distance here is about 2,000 kilometers in reality. So this body of water, if you shrunk this land down, you would realize that these bodies of water are far bigger than we have ever thought. I should say that these lines here are depicting areas that you can walk to in mainland Russia, but above this line I can't find any routes into these higher areas up here. You can walk from Magadan over here all the way to Cape Town in South Africa. You can do that. That's a 20,000 kilometer walk, and yet you can't walk up into here. oh, well, this is all frozen, people will say. It's Siberia, don't you know? Well, I've looked at the apparent satellites, and I'm not satisfied that this is just frozen tundra and that you can't cross it. There's more evidence of ice and so on the satellite stuff up here than there is in these areas over here. So I started to wonder whether none of this is, well, no, I'm not going to say none of this is real, because I think that these places, ships are perhaps going past them, and they exist in reality, these coastal areas, but that these coastal areas are so much more truncated, so that, perhaps all of Russia, that all of this area here is actually probably no bigger than about to this point here once you shrink all of these down. I will do more detailed work on this, I hope, in future. Just a quick, there's so many things that are curious about this, but this is 60. This line here is 60. And obviously this is the equator. So that distance there is to 60. And that distance there is only 30 or 32 or something. So we know that there is definitely stretching going on here. For example, and I'm running off memory now, but this distance here from Gibraltar up into the top of Finland is only about 4,000 kilometers. And yet that distance there is not hugely different from the 11 or 10,000 kilometers that we've got into Africa. So we know that this is definitely swollen in size in terms of the way it's depicted on the map here. You can't walk into any of these areas here all the way up in, okay, you can walk to Murmansk, but these areas here that are colored in, you can't walk into. Sweden is only about 700 miles long, and you can roll it down and it'll actually touch the Mediterranean Sea. Locals know that, it's one of their popular boasts. So yeah, I'm not saying that these places don't exist, but that they are controlled and they are much closer than we've ever thought, or that we imagine. This area is reachable from Europe, but this area below it is not. So as I say, I thought, well, what if I was to pull this out and try and find a more suitable location for it, allowing for the various challenges with flights. For example, Australia from Sydney to Beijing is a far longer flight than you would expect, or it's far more complicated getting from there to there. It should be a single flight. Remember, back in the 70s, we could fly all this way. So we could fly all the way from here to here in 11 hours. I used to do that as a kid. Something that was interesting was that when we flew in the 70s between South Africa and England, we always stopped at Cape Verde Islands for refueling or repressurizing, depending on your view on the way airplanes work. And they used to make the excuse that South African Airways were not, because of apartheid, were not allowed to fly over Africa, which is why we had to fly this circuitous route. But it was one of the things that made me think, well, maybe the alignment of these places is more straight up and down. If Africa is sort of more twisted, then it would make more sense to stop somewhere like that. Okay, so, well, what else have we got here that's interesting? I think one of the things, if you saw my original map, my three-legged Triskelion map, that this Greenland is nowhere near as big. It could be as, Iceland's not as big as they depicted here, I'm pretty sure, but it could be as small as that in reality. What we've got to start to allow for is the possibility that these islands, although they exist, are nothing like the size that they are depicted here. And I'm talking about like 70% smaller, 80% smaller, something like that. But what I was saying here is that none of this necessarily needs to exist. The inland areas, none of that needs to necessarily exist, because we've only got to maintain the coastline, and so that ships can travel along this way and say, yes, that's a piece of land I can recognize. What they won't necessarily realize is that they're moving past these places far more quickly. So they may say, oh, it's 4 days of sailing to get across here. I'm not saying it is, but from my memory of the shipping, the cruise ships, is that this tends to be 4 or 5 days of shipping. But then again, this is 4 or 5 days of travel just to get here. So. And oftentimes, or the way that the shipping is divvied up is that if you're responsible, or if you've ever known anyone in shipping, they tend to focus on a particular route. So my dad was in shipping, and he only ever really did the kind of England to South Africa. I think he did some Brazilian stuff as well, but he did go to Brazil, but he was never like involved in this shipping route. Or coming through the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal, which I'm sure, given how much of how many of the distances, or how many of the places kind of how many of the routes have to run through here, through Israel, this area, the instability of Syria, Jordan, Iraq, the gifting of Saudi Arabia by the establishment to the House of Saud, the instability here in Yemen, Somalia, all of that gangster stuff with the piracy and so on, to keep people away from these areas. This is all by design. So I started to wonder whether what Israel represents is, and why they needed to create that situation there. Is that it's a very important link to the deception, and keeping this area kind of locked down, keeping people under a certain amount of pressure. So that's. Let me just kind of run through some of these distances with you, and if you've got any questions, if you've got any feedback, if you've got any thoughts that challenge what I've found, please let me know. Do it respectfully. I had a guy the other day say, "Oh, if the scrounger couldn't work it out, he could register his child and be eligible for benefits." And I hadn't thought about that for a few years. I hadn't thought about it really at all, but yeah, it's true. If I had registered Alexander's birth, he would have received at least £10,000 in benefits each week. Not 10,000, but it's like £60 a week or something like that over 4 years. You're talking about 10,000. That's before you even start to ask for anything extra. The comment was removed either by him or perhaps by someone else. I don't know, but it was interesting because I was going to reply to the guy and say, obviously, if I was seeking to be a scrounger, I would be on housing benefits. I would be getting a state house. I would not be homeless, and my son would be a recipient of X amount of money. So and we live in stranger times, and going out shopping without a mask on is becoming increasingly, I'm having to ignore more and more people because, if you make eye contact with some people, they're smiling and others are scowling. Anyway, as I say, please give me some feedback. Just out of interest, yeah. Well, I'll run through these distances that I wrote down, and as I say, I didn't write them all down, but here we go. I'll Moscow to Nordvik, and you can go back and check these if I got them wrong. I initially was putting down the time when I was doing these. I was putting down the amount of hours it would take to drive sometimes, but that was when I realized, oh well, actually, if I just focus on the walks, that should do. So Moscow Nordvik, not available. Moscow Vladivostok, 9,000 Ks. Nordvik to Vladivostok, nope. There's Bulunsky district, I think is in China, and you can't reach there from Vladivostok or Beijing or Incheon. There's the flight details. 68 hours in total because you've got a few stops. Shanghai, Ulaanbaatar, no. Inner Mongolia, 1900 kilometers to Inner Mongolia from Shanghai, okay? But you can't get to Outer Mongolia. As I say, Ulaanbaatar is Outer Mongolia. Inner Mongolia to Ulaanbaatar to Vladivostok, 4,000. Ulaanbaatar to Almaty, Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan, can't get there. Nepal, can't get there. Bhutan, no. Laos, no. The Bhutan one, I might have to check on that one. Beijing, no. Laos, Beijing, Vietnam, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. These stands are very strange, and I think they are very much. And this, when you go through this, you realize that, oh wow, the Americans and the Russians are actually in bed together with the Chinese and everybody else, the British, the Israelis. It doesn't matter, people point fingers at one group or another, but the truth is they're all in. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, 1,600 Ks. Tashkent to Vladivostok, 8,200. The one to Tajikistan, I think, might be. Maybe if you put a city in there, you might get a result. Tehran is 3,000 Ks from Moscow. You wouldn't think so. To look at the map, Kazakhstan, 3,200. Kyrgyzstan, Moscow, Kyrgyzstan, 4,000. Tajikistan, no. Nur Sultan, Tajikistan, not available. As you can see, I'll just run down the page. You can slow this down if you have to. This is important. This my handwriting is so poor. Kapchagay to Tajing prefecture. These prefectures are not. This is close. These are meant to be close to each other, but there's no walking route. You can fly there in 3 flights. I'll run through these quite quickly. Moscow to Turkmenistan or Pakistan, not available. So there's just so many of these that are like, well, you can't get to these places, and they're not necessarily far. As I said earlier, Ulaanbaatar, you can't get to Beijing, and they're meant to be essentially the same organization. And I mean, you can see how you can walk over vast distances, without any trouble at all, to places that you wouldn't necessarily think you could walk to. But this one was interesting for me. Is Atari. Go and look at this one if you've got the time. You can't get to Hyderabad. This is Atari. Is I think in India. I think it was a while ago since I looked at these, but it's around here somewhere. Where was I? Yeah, Atari is interesting because there's an airport there, and what appears to be a border, which you can't cross. And when you walk just a mile down the road, it does look like stitched together pictures. But when you walk down a mile, you see farmland between either side of this border. So essentially, if you were local, you would just simply walk down the road a mile and you'd be able to walk into China, but not according to this. not according to Google Maps. So yeah, as you can see, you can do all these fantastic walks with no trouble at all. Uttarakhand, 9,000 Ks. Oh, some of these are in miles. Apologize for that, because for some reason Google Maps switches it as it goes along. I don't know if it's to confuse you, but it'll start offering you the stuff in miles. So I was writing these in miles. I know you'll be able to convert them yourself if you need to. Here's some long ones. Cape Town, Vietnam is 20,000. London is 7,600 miles. So what's that? About 11 and a half, something like that, Ks. Cape Town, Moscow is 13,000. Finland, as I said, is 14,000. St. Petersburg is 13,700. So, again, it's like this is 10, and where's St. Petersburg? Here. They're saying that is like 3,000 Ks, 3,500 Ks, which again it doesn't add up. So it would be great just to see a map of things in their actual real size, and I think that if I get the time and the peace of mind, I will do something far more detailed. It would give me great pleasure to offer you something more concise in the fullness of time. But I know that this is something I'd promised to do, and it's been on my mind. There is more work to come, more research to come. I'll just give you a quick flavor of it. When I was researching the quantum mechanics and string theories and so on, and using the what's it called? Why do I always struggle with this word? The primer fields. Using the primer field research, I started to draw up what I thought how the world was initially formed, and how the original formation of the my mind isn't with me today. The original jeepers. I'm really slowing myself up at the moment. But how hydrogen, and then eventually how Adam meets Eve, or Adam gives Eve the snake, and how we move into a double helix eventually. But I'll get into this research when I've got a little bit more kind of head time, because it does offer a lot of clues as to the world, and I think I might have mentioned to you that eventually I got to this idea that if you cut a carbon atom through the middle, and look down on it, you would see something that looked a little bit like this, with 4 ocean basins, and then a major land mass in the middle. This being, in my view, Africa, and possibly Europe, and this being the Americas, with this being South America, this being North America, and possibly this being, I was like, oh man, is this China? There you go, look. As you can see, I had a few different theories on how this could be set up. Is this Australia down here? Allowing for this is a near perfect geometric drawing, but in nature nothing is quite as perfect as that. So it could be that there's more water and less visible land in some areas than this drawing would depict. But I started to wonder that, okay, so I'd suggested to myself that this would be Europe, this would be the Russia, this could be China. But so I was hoping to find that my map, or the distances, would give me that answer. But in the end, wow, it just doesn't. I had to imagine that China wasn't here, and the reason for destabilizing the Gulf of Tonkin, controlling the Gulf of Tonkin, and having this other point here, Vladivostok, was that they were able to excise this and keep people away from and shipping away from certain areas, thus that we would never know that. And people say, but if you were taking a boat from Da Nang, say, to this place in China, wouldn't you notice that you were having to travel like a whole lot further? Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but as I said, there's plenty of flights that make absolutely no sense, and people just buy into it because they say, well, this country doesn't do this with this country, so we have to go this way around, and so on. So that's why for days I was trying to see if actually China didn't kind of sit out here, maybe turned around, but it didn't sit, it wasn't out on this out here in this way. But I couldn't find a way to make that work. I still think it's possible, but I couldn't find a way yet to make that work, which is why once I'd shrunk all of this down, remember that this distance here is only about 7,000 kilometers. This whole distance through this route is about 7,000 from the end of sort of what we call Europe. Yeah. So if you shrink all of this right down to a similar scale as this, because this is about 7,000 kilometers, then you find that all of this gets pulled down. You can't verify any of this land here, so some of this could even go away. You shrink all of this down. You end up, if you cut this out here, you end up pulling this all back into a slightly different, quite a different position. Then you pull this, and I'd pulled this out. I then plugged it back in on top, so that what happens is this area here closes right down. So the mountains of the Himalayas here actually marry into the Altai Mountains. So anyone who's on this side would never be able to walk all the way through, or if they did, I've never heard of that. We don't know how difficult all of the Himalayas are, how massive this range is. So is it possible that this is in a very different location? But I can go into that more in the future. I really wanted to get this down for others to be thinking about it, because it's going to take many minds to make this work. So this is a top-down view of carbon, one photon with 6 electrons, neutrons, and protons, one day on the Earth. So this is your rising sun. If you're standing here, it would be 6 p.m. I suppose. And I'm not going to get into this detail. I'll give you guys this video in another time. I don't want to make this too long. There's Alexander's contribution. As you can see, I spent quite a lot of time trying to plug the map or the world into this map, and I was really hopeful that I'd find something like this. It didn't quite work out like that, but this is how I started looking at possibly different configurations, trying to see how I could make this fly. This is one example of the map that I was sketching out, where you had your Arabian Peninsula very long into the Indian Asia, with China back here and all your stands in the way, and Russia pointing up there. And of course North America is nothing like the size that we're told it is. I doubt South America is either. So a little bit more sketching, scratching. Don't know if there was anything more of use. I was trying to map distances. I'm going the other way anyway. Okay, so I'll leave it there and say I hope that's useful. I hope you're well. Just a little funny. Again, probably part of the deception, but you'll notice the alignment here of the Alaskan Peninsula here, and then so just pay attention to the angle that's coming off the page. and then on this side it's at a completely different, a quite different aspect. So all of these are lying at different angles on this side of the map. It would be unnecessary to do that. As I said, this is your 60, and this is 75, by the way. So there's no 90 on here. Like, whoever goes to 90, I wonder, because I don't think it exists. But if you ask anybody, how far can you get up in Europe? It's Lapland. Everyone thinks that this is where Father Christmas is, right? Lapland, and that's what, 55 or 60 maybe. So that's a long 30 degrees, and by the way, this is 30 degrees according to this map, and these distances are being stretched. So yeah, I mean the 90 could be somewhere up here, if it were real. So yeah, let's try and find a map of the world that's the right size, and it might help answer a lot of these curiosities for us. So good luck and take care, dear friends, and for those rude ones, well, I'll just block your comments, but have a good day.